Welcome back to ResourceCast, a weekly podcast examining hard questions related to natural resources. We are seeing the tipping point of the nature playing out in very strange manners in the last few months. Nobody may have imagined a situation where most human population of this planet will be under virtual lockdown. Yet the unanticipated has happened. We have models of all kinds that seek to predict the future course of this pandemic. Yet these models come up with diverse solutions, with diverse outcomes. Governments depend on such models to make important decisions. Should we shut down? How long should the lockdown last? And when should we open up? Or questions like how many ventilators are required? When should we scale up testing? Or what sort of messages should go out to the public? In the last episode, we discussed a little about the power laws and the Levy patterns that govern most distributions. These patterns have an important role in modeling and the spread of virus. The Levy pattern or the Levy walk is what we will discuss today. I am Hari Tulsidas. If you have a comment or a question we would like to know it, please email or leave a comment on Reddit. Details are available on the show notes. Today is 12th April 2020. Cooped up in our homes, or wherever we can find a place to shelter, we are not short of one thing: a constant flow of information on what might be the future of this pandemic. How is it evolving? How is it changing? What is going to happen in future? Is it looking bad? Are we flattening the curve? Is the peak there yet? Also, we get some dire warnings, like how many months we are going to be locked in, how many more deaths we are going to see. Is there going to be a second wave, which could be much worse? Frankly, we are all confused by this constant bombardment of different messages. They all fit into different extremes, and we are yet to see a common thread emerging from various messages that we receive on a constant basis daily. It is our wish that some kind of an assurance that the experts know what they are talking is there. There should be some clarity in the predictions. Models can differ, but in the end, some sort of synthesis should happen. Let us take one aspect the models seldom recognize: the Levy walk. Perhaps this alternate view will bring some kind of a clarity. Why? Various estimations on the spread of COVID-19 says that the virus spread, which is governed by a notation called R0, which actually denotes transmissivity of the virus. Various estimates says that the R0 is about 3. There are estimates which vary from this, starting from 2 and going up to 9. So having R0 of 3 and an R0 of 9 have different implications. One thing is how much penetration the virus is going to make into the population. With an R0 of 3, maybe around 40% of the population will be infected. If it is rising to 5, maybe 70% of the population. With an R0 of 9, it could be possible that 100% of the population could be infected. R0 of 3 is usually the number that we take in most of our calculation regarding COVID-19. But this number, even though is small and could give us some hope that it is not going to be that widespread in the population, is also bad in some aspects. R0 of 3 can cause exponential growth in the infection. It is also very difficult to model using simple numerical analysis. The R0 of 3 sits just in the threshold of faster transmission. Below 3, it will slow down, and if you have an R0 of 1, it means that it is not growing, it is remaining stable and could become endemic in the population. And R0 below 1 means that the virus infection is dying out. But R0 of 3 sits just at the tipping point, and exponential growth is possible. On the higher end, R0 of 9 could be indicative of a faster transmission. Such faster transmissions are mostly uniform in its behavior and therefore easier to model. The mixing of infected persons in a population of uninfected people could be progressing in a uniform manner when you have an R0 of 9. R0 of 3, on the other hand, doesn't spread the virus evenly. R0 of 9 could be equated to a normal distribution, a bell-shaped curve. Most values cluster around a mean, and the extremes on both ends are rare. R0 of 3 fuels a distribution called the long-tailed distribution. Here, a less frequently occurring event can cause inordinately large impacts. So few events which are less frequent hold the sum total of the outcome of this event when you have a long-tailed distribution. It is similar to saying that 20% of the population owns 80% of the wealth. The well-known example of Pareto's power law. Levy walk is one example of this long-tailed distribution. The movement of animals closely resembles, in many ways, the random walks of dust particles in a fluid. This similarity led to trying to understand how animals move via the analogy of Brownian motion. Brownian motion is the random motion of particles suspended in a fluid, a liquid, or a gas, resulting from collision with fast-moving molecules in the fluid. This is named after the botanist Robert Brown, who was the most eminent microscopist of his time. In 1827, while looking through a microscope at pollen of a plant immersed in water, he saw that triangular-shaped pollens burst at the corners, emitting particles which he noted jiggled around in the water in a random fashion. He was not able to determine the mechanisms that caused the motion. Atoms and molecules that long been theorized as the constituents of matter, and Albert Einstein in 1905 explained in precise detail how the motion that Brown had observed was a result of pollen being moved by individual water molecules, making one of the biggest contributions to science. This explanation of Brownian motion served as convincing evidence that atoms and molecules exist and was further verified experimentally by Jean Perrin in 1908. Perrin was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1926 for his work on discontinuous structure of matter. The direction of force of atomic bombardment is constantly changing, and at different times, a particle is hit more on one side than another, leading to the seemingly random nature of motion. The Brownian model was the conventional wisdom that was held to explain animal movements until early 1990s. However, starting in 1980s, evidence began to accumulate animal movements doesn't fit theoretical predictions of Brownian motion. When scientists studied patterns used by animals that were searching for food, they found another pattern. Levy walks a random walk search strategy used by a wide variety of organisms when searching for heterogeneously distributed food. This type of search involves mostly short move steps, defined as distance traveled before pausing or changing direction, combined with rarer long move steps. Sharks, honeybees, and spider monkeys, and many other animals show this pattern. Evidence of Levy walks have been even found in the way people wander through university campuses or urban environments or in a Disney World. Water dripping out of a leaking faucet shows this pattern. This pattern was also demonstrated in the case of the 2002 SARS outbreak. Levy pattern is one type of random walk in which each successive move is chosen randomly and is influenced by the previous move. You can think of a drunk stumbling along, where a step to the right is just as likely as a step left, with no memory on the route he has taken. In a Levy walk, most of the steps are within a small area, but longer routes are taken on an occasion. In the past decade or so, this Levy-like behavior in how all sorts of creatures, from bacteria to penguins, poke around to find a meal. One large study of marine predators, such as sharks and tuna, found Levy walks alternated with another type of movement. Found Levy walks alternated with Brownian motion. When a prey is abundant, Brownian motion seemed to be the right choice, sort of picking through an area at random, collecting the bounty. However, when food is sparse, Levy patterns emerge. The problem with Levy pattern is that they are not amenable to simple statistics. How does it stack up to the spread of a virus? Levy walk is named after the French mathematician Paul Levy. The term was coined by Benoit Mandelbrot. Mandelbrot is a Polish-born French and American mathematician and a polymath with broad interest in practical sciences, especially regarding what he labeled as the art of roughness of physical phenomena and the uncontrolled element in life. He referred himself as a fractalist and is recognized for his contribution to the field of fractal geometry, which included coining the word fractal, as well as developing the theory of roughness and self-similarity in nature. Fractals exhibit similar patterns at increasingly small scales called self-similarity, also known as expanding similarity or unfolding similarity. If this replication is exactly same at every level, it is called self-similar. Imagine the shape of a tree with the main trunk and diverging branches. Now look at that leaf and you can see the same pattern in the veins of the leaf. This is self-similarity. The definition of Levy flight stems from the mathematics related to chaos theory. It is useful in measurements and simulations of natural phenomena. Examples include earthquakes, financial mathematics, cryptography, signal analysis, as well as many applications in astronomy, biology, and physics. Another application is the Levy flight foraging hypothesis. When sharks and other ocean predators can't find food, they abandon the Brownian motion, the random motion seen in swirling gas molecules, for Levy flight. A mix of long trajectories and short, random movements found in turbulent fluids. Researchers have analyzed over 12 million movements recorded over 5,700 days in 55 data logger tagged animals from 14 ocean predator species in the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans, including silky sharks, yellow tuna, blue marlin, and swordfish. Birds and other animals, including humans, follow paths that have been modeled using Levy flight. Movement patterns resembling Levy walks have been observed at scales ranging from microscopic to the ecological. They have been seen in molecular machinery operating within cells during intercellular trafficking, in the movement pattern of T cells within the brain, in DNA, in some mollusks, insects, fish, birds, and mammals, in airborne flights of spores and seeds, and in the collective movements of some animal groups. Levy walks are also evident in trace fossils or ichnofossils, the preserved form of tracks made by organisms that occupied seabeds millions of years ago. They are also utilized by algae that originated around 2 billion years ago and still exist today. This is truly a frontier of a very active field of scientific inquiry. In recent years, scientists across disciplines recognized that fractal properties of Levy walks can be advantageous during searching because they reduce the needless revisiting of previously traversed terrain and as a consequence may be under positive selection pressure. This was a revolutionary idea as it suggested that Levy walks might be seen across taxa and represent innate, evolved optimal searching strategy. Studies have demonstrated mathematically that foragers with Levy walk movement patterns can indeed outperform foragers with other kinds of movement patterns. In a Levy walk, the longest step dominates, dwarfing the contribution of other steps in the movement pattern. Their association with the presence of evolutionary attractor is useful because it leads to new hypotheses and new methods of analysis, and it has predictive power that ecologists and biologists can work with. Levy walk movement patterns may be common and follow general rules that apply widely and are context independent. Defining characteristic of Levy walks have also broken free from their spatial confines and have been found to characterize the duration of pauses between movement bouts. The pause duration in these diverse predatory groups are, in fact, well approximated by heavy-tailed power law distribution over data ranging from seconds to hours. This would suggest that power law scaling applies generally across taxa, with divergent foraging strategies, ranging from highly mobile pursuit predators, that is Levy walkers, to less mobile ambush predators. Levy walk movement patterns have been found to emerge from collective behaviors and are evident to some extent in swarming bacteria, in midge swarms, in termite broods, and in fish. Levy walks entered the biological literature more than 20 years ago. Now we have a much better understanding of the very diverse but context-specific condition under which Levy walk can rise, many of which are unrelated to advantageous foraging. These Levy walks arise freely and perhaps surprisingly from the simplest of processes and have been hiding in plain sight, are rigid and accidentally optimal. It should now come as no surprise that some organisms will sometimes have movement patterns that resemble Levy walks. Levy walks are not some exotic form of movement pattern divorced from reality, but one that is entirely natural. The SARS virus epidemic of 2002 was demonstrated to follow Levy paths. The COVID-19 could also emerge as a prime example of the Levy pattern. In this case, the virus travels in short steps interspersed by long jumps. Now, we know that viruses are inanimate matter. They can't move or do anything on their own. It is the humans who carry the viruses. And we have seen that humans have demonstrated to favor Levy walks in different situations. That is why one person in South Korea, known as patient 31, who infected 1,200 other people, could change the tables in that country. The R naught in this case is 1,200, and this one Levy jump was responsible for 80% of the infections in South Korea. A similar situation is seen with the Tablighi Jamaat congregations that took place in Malaysia, India, and Pakistan. These meetings spread the viruses not only in these three countries, but also to a number of countries, starting from the Middle East, the Gaza Strip, to Central Asia, and several South Asian countries. Similarly, a church congregation in France was instrumental in spread of coronavirus in the early phases in the country. And this incident also took the viruses to several other countries in West Africa. Therefore, not figuring out Levy walks makes our calculations go wrong. Yet, we have not seen any paper that has seriously considered Levy walk when modeling the pandemic. One reason why so diverse outcomes emerge from modeling is because these models are dependent on several assumptions. And these assumptions are dependent on other assumptions. And those assumptions are in turn dependent on yet another set of assumptions. So assumptions leading to assumptions will provide an output that could be totally divorced from the reality. And many of these models use very simplistic numerical analysis, which also could end up in missing the complexity that could be introduced into the system by phenomena such as Levy walks. When R naught of an infection is 3, as we see in the COVID-19 pandemic, it has to be assumed that Levy patterns are dominating the spread of this virus. Uniform mixing of infected persons in a population may not be possible when Levy walks dominate. When R naught is high as 9 or 12, maybe Brownian motion could dominate. Perhaps COVID-19 can show the characteristics of both Brownian motion and Levy walks. The SARS epidemic was shown to follow Levy walks, appeared suddenly, and after 4 months, it disappeared suddenly. This is a feature of long-tailed distributions. COVID-19 may also exhibit such a feature. It may just vanish one day as it appeared. The question is only when that is going to happen. We can discuss this in the future episodes of ResourceCast. We can stop here. The ResourceCast will be back next week. Till then, goodbye.